Time moves forward without hesitation, but you can feel the quiet truth you rarely say out loud. Days keep unfolding, clocks keep ticking, the world keeps accelerating. Yet inside, something remains eerily unchanged. There is a strange ache in realizing this, not because you've done anything wrong, but because time is supposed to move you somewhere. It's supposed to carry you into a different version of yourself. Instead, it keeps dragging you through the same internal landscape, as if nothing within has caught up. You wake into new mornings with old thoughts. You step into new opportunities with familiar fears. You move through the present while still shaped by the past. And no matter how many hours or weeks pass, the shift you've been waiting for never arrives on its own. Time feels like a river you're standing inside, without actually being carried by. You feel the current around you, but not within you. There's a deeper tension here, one that's almost unsettling, because if change truly required time, you would already be living the life you've imagined so vividly. If growth were simply a matter of days passing, you would already be transformed. But you're not, and you can feel that gap, the dissonance between the movement of the clock and the stillness of your identity. It creates a pressure, a quiet urgency. Something should be different by now, yet it isn't. This is where the illusion of linear progress begins to crack. The more you push, the more you strive, the more you wait for time to deliver the breakthrough, the more you realize it never does. Time is indifferent. It moves forward no matter what you do. It pulls you into the future, but it will not change you on its own. And that is the unsettling truth most people never confront. Time can pass for years, and nothing inside will shift unless something breaks the internal cycle. You've seen this in your own life, patterns that repeat, habits that survive every intention to change, emotions that linger long after they should have dissolved. You watch yourself reenact the same stories, even when you consciously want something different. It's not laziness. It's not a lack of desire. It's simply that nothing inside has reorganized. Time has moved, but you haven't. And yet, if you look back, the moments that truly changed you were never slow. They didn't come from months of trying. They came in flashes, moments when something inside clicked, when clarity struck, when identity shifted even before your circumstances did. Those moments ignored the calendar entirely. They weren't gradual, they were instantaneous, almost outside of time. This is the doorway you're approaching now. The recognition that real transformation doesn't follow the movement of the clock. It follows the movement of your state. It follows coherence. It follows alignment. It follows the internal shift that can happen in a second, the kind that rewires everything at once. Time will keep moving forward. It always will. But the moment you see that your transformation doesn't depend on time at all, you begin to sense the truth. You're not waiting for time to change you. You're waiting for the internal pivot that finally allows you to move with time instead of being carried by it. If you're ready to finally shift into your highest timeline, subscribe to receive important teachings that will help you do so. There is a moment, quiet, precise, unmistakable, when everything inside you changes without warning. It doesn't follow the calendar. It doesn't wait for progress. It doesn't ask for permission. It simply arrives, breaking through the familiar rhythm of your inner world like a crack of light. And in that instant, you sense something most people never recognize. Transformation is not a gradual climb. It's an internal click, a shift of identity that ignores time completely. You've felt shades of this before. A sudden realization that altered how you saw someone. A moment of clarity that ended a pattern you thought you'd never escape. A decision so sharp and irreversible that it separated your life into before and after. These moments didn't take hours. They weren't built from steady effort. They were immediate, almost timeless. Something within you reorganized itself, and the world you stepped into after was not the same as the one you lived in just seconds earlier. This is the first crack in the illusion that change requires time. We're taught to believe that transformation is linear, that growth must unfold slowly, that becoming someone new demands lengthy preparation. But identity doesn't operate on a timeline. It operates on coherence, on the alignment of thought, emotion, and internal truth. When these line up, even for a second, the shift is instantaneous. The past loses its grip. The future becomes accessible, and a new version of you emerges without needing time to build itself. It feels almost like a reset, but deeper. Not a change in behavior, but a change in who you are as you move through the world. It's the moment when an old belief dissolves, a new perspective locks into place, or an inner resistance finally lets go. You don't think your way into it. You fall into it, as if something inside finally reaches its threshold and chooses a new state. And once the choice is made, the old timeline, the one shaped by your previous identity, no longer fits. This is why people can change their lives in a single decision after years of stagnation. Why a person can walk away from a limiting pattern in one conversation. Why someone can wake up one morning and no longer resonate with who they were the night before. It's not because time created the change. It's because the internal architecture reorganized in a moment of coherence, aligning emotion, understanding, and identity all at once. When coherence snaps into place, the illusion of gradual transformation dissolves. You begin to see that time had nothing to do with your evolution. The breakthrough wasn't waiting in the future. It was waiting for alignment. And when that alignment arrives, it bypasses the slow, predictable pacing of linear progress. It reaches straight into the core of who you believe yourself to be and rewrites it instantly. This is the moment the old timeline fractures. The moment you stop living as the person shaped by yesterday's identity. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's a subtle, profound shift that ripples outward into every area of your life. And once it happens, you understand something that changes everything. Transformation doesn't require time. It requires coherence, and coherence can happen right now. Most people walk the long road without ever realizing it. They assume that change requires distance, that transformation is earned through persistence, patience, and the steady accumulation of effort. They tell themselves that if they just keep trying, keep pushing, keep striving, keep improving, eventually their lives will shift, and so they move forward step by step, hoping that time and hard work will eventually deliver them into a new reality. But the long road is deceptive. It promises progress while slowly draining your energy, asking for more effort than it ever returns. You felt this road before. It's the path where you tell yourself you'll change when you're ready, when you've healed enough, when you've learned enough, when the circumstances are finally right. It's the endless self-improvement loop. New books, new habits, new routines, new systems, all in the hope that the next one will be the breakthrough. But each step on this road subtly reinforces the same message. You are not there yet. You are not enough yet. You are still becoming. And because you keep identifying as someone on the way, you never arrive. This is the exhaustion most people carry, not from lack of desire, but from the constant sense that the desired version of themselves is always ahead, somewhere in the future, somewhere out of reach. When you chase outcomes, you accidentally stretch the distance between yourself and the life you want. The more you focus on the gap, the wider it feels. Time becomes something you must conquer rather than something you move with. Progress becomes slow because you've placed the thing you want on a timeline, imagining it as a destination that exists later rather than a state that can be activated now. This is why the long road feels so heavy. Every effort is layered with the subtle belief that change takes time. And because the belief is there, the experience follows. You try to evolve through discipline, repetition, and willpower, but the inner state, the frequency from which you live, remains the same. You can change your behaviors for weeks, even months, yet the identity beneath them doesn't shift. And without an identity shift, the old patterns quietly rebuild themselves the moment your effort relaxes. People misinterpret this as failure. They think they lack commitment or strength. But the truth is simpler and more compassionate. The long road is exhausting because it relies on doing rather than being. It leans on the assumption that external change can force internal change when the opposite is true. The internal state always comes first. Without a shift in frequency, without a change in emotional alignment, the outer world has no new foundation to reflect. This is why some people spend years trying to change and never feel different. They keep walking, but they remain the same. Time moves, but their state doesn't. And so the long road stretches endlessly before them. Not because change is inherently slow, but because they are using a method that cannot create the shift they're seeking. The long road keeps you becoming. But the moment you understand that true change is not about distance, not about duration, and not about striving, a different possibility emerges. One where the shortest path is not forward at all, but inward, toward the frequency that collapses the gap between who you are and who you long to be. Most people never realize that while they're working tirelessly to change their lives, reality is responding to something far more subtle than their effort. You've been taught to measure progress in hours, days, and years. You've been conditioned to believe that transformation arrives on a schedule, slowly, predictably, as the result of consistent work. But beneath that conditioning lies a quieter truth, one that almost no one sees until they stumble into it by accident. Reality responds to who you are being, not how long you've been trying. There is a shortcut woven into the fabric of change, hidden in plain sight. You've glimpsed it in your own life, even if you didn't recognize it at the time. A moment when things shifted for you without explanation. A sudden opportunity that appeared when you stopped overthinking. A relationship that improved the moment your internal stance softened. It wasn't the passing of time that caused any of those shifts. It was a change in your internal state, a shift so instantaneous and natural that you barely noticed it happening. Yet the world around you responded immediately. When you look closely, you'll see that your life has never been shaped by time. It has always been shaped by frequency. The days and weeks you spent working hard only moved the outer pieces. The moments when something inside you shifted changed the entire landscape. This is the part most people overlook. The inner state you occupy becomes the lens that reality organizes itself around. It's not your schedule that moves you toward the version of yourself you want to become. It's the internal alignment that matches that version. Think about the times when you felt clear, grounded, or certain, even for a moment. Notice how different your choices were. Notice how people responded to you. Notice how you seemed to attract situations that mirrored that clarity. That was the shortcut working, not through effort, not through striving, but through coherence, through the alignment between your thoughts, emotions, and identity, even if only briefly. And in those moments, you weren't moving toward your desired self, you were touching it directly. This is the route almost no one takes, not because it's hidden, but because it defies everything you've been taught about change. We're taught to improve ourselves step by step, to climb slowly toward the future. But there is a more direct path, one that doesn't require time to accumulate. It requires recognition. It requires the understanding that identity shifts aren't built. They're accessed. They're stepped into. And the moment you inhabit the internal state of the version of you that you're trying to reach, the long road dissolves. This isn't about pretending or forcing. It's about noticing that the path you thought you needed to walk may not exist at all. The transformation you want isn't sitting somewhere far ahead of you. It's sitting in a different internal state that you haven't fully stepped into yet. And once you see that, you start to sense the truth. The shortcut isn't something you do, it's something you become. Time doesn't deliver you to the desired self. A shift in state does, and that shift can happen the instant you recognize it. Most people live caught in a pendulum they can't see. On one side swings the version of you shaped by old habits, familiar emotions, and patterns that have repeated themselves for years. On the other side swings the version of you shaped by your intentions, the future you keep reaching for, imagining, striving toward. Every day you move back and forth between these two identities. You wake with clarity, then fall into old reactions. You feel motivated, then slip into doubt. You decide who you want to become, then watch yourself act like who you've always been. This oscillation is so common that it feels normal, but it creates a constant tension, movement without progress, motion without direction. You can feel the pendulum in your own life. You've had moments of deep intention, moments when the future version of you feels close, almost present. Then, almost without noticing, you drift back into the familiar gravity of your past self. You don't choose it consciously. It's simply where the pendulum swings next. The past pulls you with its weight, the future pulls you with its promise, and you live suspended between the two, never fully landing in either. This is why change can feel unstable. You're not stuck because you lack discipline. You're stuck because you're moving on the outer edges of the pendulum, where the motion is exaggerated and the momentum is strong. Out there, it's easy to get swept into old behaviors or grasp onto new intentions without grounding them. At the edges, everything feels urgent. Everything feels like effort. You're either fighting who you were or reaching for who you want to become. Both directions create turbulence. But there's a deeper truth hidden in this metaphor. A pendulum only swings because the center is still. The axis, the point everything hangs from, doesn't move. It doesn't oscillate. It doesn't chase the future or repeat the past. It simply exists in quiet, unwavering stability. And this is the part most people never realize. The axis is your identity, not the identity you perform through habits or the identity you imagine through intentions, but the identity that sits underneath both, a deeper state of being not driven by memory or desire. Transformation doesn't happen at the edges. It doesn't happen in the swing. It happens at the axis, because the axis is where coherence lives. It's where the tug of the past loosens and the pull of the future softens. It's the point where clarity emerges without effort, where the mind quiets enough to sense the truth of who you are becoming before the external world reflects it. When you shift into the axis, you stop oscillating. You stop fighting. You stop trying. You step into the stillness that makes real change possible. Most people never pause long enough to reach that center. They're always reacting to the pull of their old identity or striving toward their new one. But when you recognize the pendulum and step inward toward the unmoving center, you discover something powerful. The version of you that can change everything is not swinging between extremes. It's already waiting at the axis, quietly holding the frequency of the person you're meant to become. Change doesn't happen because you think differently. It doesn't happen because you try harder or set clearer goals. Real transformation begins in the moment when your emotion, your inner imagery, and your sense of identity fall into alignment. This alignment, this state of coherence, is the quiet mechanism that rewires the entire system. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It's a subtle synchronization that shifts you from who you were into who you are becoming. And it does so with a precision that time alone could never replicate. Most people live with these parts of themselves scattered. They imagine one future, feel another emotion, and identify as someone shaped by the past. The mind wants something new, but the body is still responding to old experiences. The imagination paints a possibility, but the nervous system doesn't believe it. When these elements operate out of sync, change requires force. You push yourself, discipline yourself, coax yourself into new behaviors. But none of it lasts because the deeper system hasn't reorganized. You're trying to build a new life on an old frequency. Coherence is what dissolves that split. It draws your imagery, your emotions, and your identity into a single, unified state. When you feel a vision as real, the body responds as if it's happening now. When emotion supports the image rather than contradicting it, the nervous system begins to shift. When identity reorganizes around that feeling, the mind no longer fights against the new direction. It recognizes it as familiar, even natural. This is where the true mechanism of transformation begins, not in effort, but in alignment. Science catches glimpses of this through neuroplasticity and heart-brain synchronization. Neuroplasticity shows that the brain rewires itself in response to emotional states, not just thoughts. The heart's electromagnetic field shifts when emotion and cognition align, and that coherence influences the entire neurological landscape. When the heart and brain synchronize, the body enters a state where change becomes not only possible, but efficient. Patterns that once felt locked begin to loosen. Behaviors that felt foreign begin to feel accessible. Identity starts to bend toward the version of you that matches the coherence. Metaphysically, this coherence signals a shift in frequency, a state in which your inner world matches the timeline you want to inhabit. But even from a grounded perspective, it's simply the moment when every part of you stops contradicting itself. The inner conflict dissolves, the resistance softens. You no longer feel like you're fighting your own biology. Instead, your system begins to support the direction you're moving in. You've experienced fragments of coherence before, moments when you felt aligned, clear, and deeply certain without knowing why. In those moments, decisions felt effortless. The next step felt obvious. Reality seemed to respond with surprising fluidity. That was coherence at work, even if only briefly. It is the internal harmony that changes perception, behavior, and possibility all at once. The reason coherence is the real mechanism of change is because it transforms you from the inside out. When your imagery, emotion, and identity finally match, the system reorganizes instantly. You don't have to push, you don't have to force, you shift because there is nothing inside of you sending a competing signal. Coherence becomes the doorway through which a new version of yourself emerges. Not through time, but through alignment. If you're resonating with this, hit the like button as a form of keeping your vibration high. Visualization is often misunderstood as a mental exercise, as if imagining a future could shape reality through thought alone. People picture their goals, rehearse scenes in their mind, and expect the outer world to shift in response. But imagery by itself is fragile. It flickers. It dissolves the moment doubt rises. Without emotion to anchor it, visualization remains a distant idea rather than a lived possibility. The mind can create images effortlessly, but unless the body believes those images, they carry no influence. They float at the surface, disconnected from the deeper mechanisms that create real change. The truth is that visualization only becomes powerful when it transforms into a frequency, when it stops being something you think about and becomes something you feel through your whole system. Imagery is the blueprint, but emotion is the electricity that animates it. Without that emotional charge, the body continues responding to old patterns, old identities, old memories. It doesn't reorganize simply because you imagine something new. It reorganizes when the imagery and the emotion converge into a coherent signal, one strong enough to override the familiar pathways of the past. This is the quantum nature of visualization. It is not about seeing, it is about being. When you imagine a future while embodying no emotional connection to it, you remain separate from it. You are an observer looking at a possibility from the outside. But the moment you feel that future as if it's happening now, you step inside it. You stop projecting the vision and start inhabiting it. the body begins to respond to the imagery as reality, because biologically it cannot distinguish between a vividly felt internal state and an external experience. This is where visualization becomes a signal rather than a thought. The emotional resonance creates coherence, and that coherence becomes the frequency the body organizes around. You can sense this in the moments when a vision feels real enough to affect your breathing, your posture, your energy. Suddenly, the image is not just in your mind, it's in your physiology. The heart rate shifts, the nervous system recalibrates, the brain begins to fire in patterns consistent with the imagined reality. This is no longer imagination. It is internal experience. When visualization reaches this level, it communicates with the body more clearly than the past does. And because the body is the anchor of your identity, shifting its response shifts who you perceive yourself to be. This is why embodied visualization can alter your state in an instant. You are not convincing yourself of a new possibility. You are giving your system a new reference point to align with. In this way, visualization becomes a kind of internal tuning. You are tuning your emotional frequency to match the version of yourself you want to become, not through words, not through effort, through resonance. And when the resonance is strong enough, when the imagery and the emotion merge into one coherent state, the body accepts it as truth. That acceptance is what alters behavior, perception, and ultimately, the timeline you step into. Visualization only transforms reality when it stops being an idea and becomes a felt frequency the body recognizes as its own. There is a point where visualization stops being imagination and becomes identity. That point is the essence of this technique. You're not just seeing a future, you're feeling it as if it has already happened. You're not waiting for the desired reality to arrive. You're stepping into the emotional atmosphere of the version of you who lives it now. This is the fastest technique because it bypasses the long road entirely. It doesn't ask you to build a bridge from where you are to where you want to be. It asks you to occupy the state of the future self and let your system reorganize around that frequency. This isn't pretending, it's not forcing, it's not trying to convince yourself. It's the simple act of letting your body feel what your mind sees. The moment the imagery is paired with the emotion of already true, something profound happens. The distance between you and your desire collapses. Not in the external world yet, but internally, where all timelines begin. When you feel the reality is present, you send a single, unified signal to your nervous system, your subconscious, your identity. You're no longer projecting a future, you're embodying it. The body is the key here. It responds only to what feels real. You could visualize for hours, but if the emotion contradicts the image, if you feel doubt, distance, or longing, then you're reinforcing separation. But the moment you allow yourself to feel the emotion that matches the fulfilled vision, the body shifts instantly. It recognizes the state. It responds to it. It reorganizes around it. And because the body is the anchor of your identity, that emotional shift becomes an identity shift. When identity shifts, the timeline shifts, not gradually, but immediately. You stop acting as someone moving toward the desire and begin acting as someone living from it. Your choices change without effort. Your behaviors align naturally. Your perception sharpens toward opportunities that were previously invisible. You don't push reality, you tune to it, and reality responds to the tuning. Feeling as if your desire is already true is not about escaping the present. It's about selecting a different version of the present internally. It is choosing the emotional frequency of the life you want, rather than the emotional remnants of the life you've known. For a moment, and it only takes a moment, you step into the completed version of your story. You let the body breathe as that version. You let the heart resonate as that version. You let the mind quiet because there's nothing left to reach for when you feel the outcome is done. This technique works because it creates coherence. The imagery offers the blueprint, the fulfilled emotion offers the signal. Identity merges with both, and in that merging, the gap that time once seemed to stretch disappears. This is what collapsing a timeline means. The future state becomes emotionally present, and the body cannot help but follow. You're not imagining your way forward, you're embodying your way into alignment. And once the body accepts the new state as real, the external world begins to rearrange around that acceptance. There is a moment when the body decides which version of reality you are living in, and that decision has nothing to do with your intentions or how clearly you can think. It happens at the level of emotion, quietly, immediately, and without negotiation. The body doesn't wait for evidence. It doesn't care about timelines. It aligns itself with whatever emotional state you hold most vividly right now. This is why feeling is the true switch between timelines. The emotional frequency you embody becomes the anchor point your subconscious organizes around, and reality begins to mirror that internal alignment whether you're aware of it or not. Most people try to change their lives by thinking differently, but thought alone doesn't create the shift. Thought is a direction, not a signal. The body responds to emotional truth, to the felt sense of what is real in this moment. If your thoughts say one thing but your emotions say another, the body follows the emotion. If you imagine a future but feel the weight of the past, the body trusts the past. It always chooses the emotional state because emotion carries the biological signature of your identity. That signature is what determines the timeline you're aligned with. This is why timelines don't change gradually. They change the instant your emotional state reorganizes. The subconscious is not slow. It doesn't update in increments. It updates in leaps, moments of coherence where what you feel, what you imagine, and who you believe yourself to be lock into a single direction. Those moments can happen in seconds. One breath of genuine alignment is more powerful than weeks of effort without it. Because when emotion matches intention, the subconscious receives a clear signal. This is who we are now. That clarity is what collapses the distance between where you've been and where you're going. When the emotion of fulfillment becomes present, the subconscious cannot tell whether the experience is internal or external. It simply responds. It adjusts your posture, your perception, your micro choices. It filters reality differently. You start noticing possibilities you once overlooked. You interpret events through a new identity. You take actions that feel natural rather than forced. None of this is deliberate. It's automatic. The body moves toward the timeline your emotional state has selected. This is why feeling is not a byproduct of manifestation. It is the mechanism. The emotional state you embody becomes the frequency that attracts experiences, but more importantly, it becomes the internal map your subconscious uses to navigate reality. When you feel the desired reality as if it is already true, the subconscious begins reorganizing in real time. Old patterns loosen, old beliefs soften, old identities lose their authority. You shift because the system no longer has a reason to hold the past in place. The timeline switch isn't mystical, it's biological. It's the moment your nervous system accepts the emotion of the new reality as more compelling than the memory of the old one. And once that happens, the shift is immediate. Your internal world updates. Your external world follows. The body, not the clock, is what determines when your transformation begins. There is a moment, so subtle you might miss it, when the body finally believes the reality you've been envisioning. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't rush in with intensity. It arrives like a quiet internal click, a soft shift in orientation, as if something inside you exhales and agrees with the future you've been holding. That agreement is powerful. It's the point where imagination stops being a possibility and becomes a lived truth within your physiology. Before that click, you are trying to shift. After it, you are already shifted. You've felt versions of this before, the instant when doubt loosens its grip and you suddenly feel calm without knowing why. The moment when the thought of your future doesn't feel distant, but familiar. These experiences seem minor, but they're actually the body signaling that a new identity has been accepted, not intellectually, but somatically. The nervous system responds first, often with a sense of warmth or spaciousness or quiet clarity. It's the sensation of no longer arguing with yourself. The internal resistance that once held the past in place begins to soften. This click happens when emotion and vision align in a way the body recognizes as coherent. The envisioned reality isn't just a picture in your mind. It becomes a felt experience. The body isn't responding to hope or longing. It's responding to the emotional signature of completion. And because your physiology cannot distinguish between an intensely felt internal state and an external event, it reacts immediately. Hormones shift, muscle tension changes, the breath deepens. Your entire system starts reflecting the identity that matches the emotion, not the identity shaped by your past. When the body believes, everything downstream changes. Perception sharpens in the direction of the new identity. Choices simplify because the future self isn't theoretical anymore. It's embodied. Your posture subtly adjusts, your tone shifts, your micro-expressions align with confidence or clarity or abundance, depending on the state you've stepped into. These aren't conscious behaviors. They're automatic expressions of the identity you've allowed yourself to feel. This is why the moment of belief matters more than the amount of time you spend visualizing. You can imagine something for years without ever shifting because the body was never convinced. But the instant the emotional frequency matches the envisioned reality, the system reorganizes. The past no longer feels like the strongest point of reference. The future becomes the anchor. It feels nearer, not as a hope, but as a memory your body is catching up to. The click is not dramatic because truth rarely needs to be. What changes everything is the quiet internal recognition. This is who I am now. It isn't forced, it isn't performed, it's simply accepted. And once acceptance is present, the old identity begins to loosen its hold, not because you pushed it away, but because it no longer aligns with the state your body is inhabiting. This is the moment the shift becomes real. Not when you think differently, but when you feel differently. Not when you try to change, but when your physiology reorganizes around the new identity. From that point forward, you're no longer trying to become the version of yourself you imagined. You're living from it, and the body leads the way into the timeline that matches its belief. There's a quiet art to holding a new state without gripping it too tightly. Most people try to maintain a higher frequency through effort, as if they have to concentrate hard enough or sustain the feeling for long periods of time. But coherence doesn't respond to force. The moment you strain, you slip out of alignment. The moment you try to hold the state through effort, you confirm that you don't truly feel it. What matters is not duration, but intensity of presence, the purity of the moment you drop into the state, even briefly, without tension or expectation. Holding a frequency is less about maintaining and more about returning. It's about letting the state be natural rather than manufactured. Think of it like tuning an instrument. You don't press harder on the strings to make the tone stay pure. You simply tune it and then play with lightness. If it falls out of tune, you tune it again. No drama, no urgency, no fear that the music will vanish. The same principle applies here. When you feel the desired state as already true, your system resonates. When you try to cling to it, the resonance tightens and collapses. This is why ease is essential. Ease signals trust. It signals that the body accepts the new state without resistance. When you relax into the feeling rather than chasing it, the coherence strengthens. You give the body permission to stabilize around the identity you've embodied. There is no pressure to maintain an emotional high. No need to hold the state for minutes or hours. A single moment of genuine alignment is more transformative than extended periods of forced positivity. The body responds to authenticity, not duration. You can sense the difference immediately when you force the feeling. There's tension. Your breath becomes shallow. Your mind starts checking whether you're doing it right. The body doesn't believe that. It knows when the state is real. But when you approach the feeling gently, when you let the emotion rise on its own and simply meet it with presence, your physiology softens, the breath deepens, the signal becomes clearer. This clarity is coherence, and coherence is what shifts timelines. Holding the frequency is really about allowing. Instead of gripping the emotion, you let it echo through you. Even if it fades, you don't chase it. You return to it when needed, without pressure. In this way, the state becomes familiar. It becomes the emotional home you slip back into. And as it becomes familiar, it becomes embodied. Once it's embodied, it no longer requires effort to maintain. It becomes the background tone of your identity. This is why the shift doesn't require constant focus. You don't need to hold the feeling all day. You only need to feel it deeply enough, even briefly, for the system to recognize it as a valid state. Once recognized, the body begins reinforcing it on its own. New choices arise naturally. New interpretations appear effortlessly. You find yourself acting in ways that match the higher timeline without even thinking about it. The frequency holds you as much as you hold it. You step into it with presence, not pressure. You return to it with gentleness, not urgency. And through this ease, the new identity stabilizes, not through force, but through resonance. There is a misconception that transformation must feel explosive, intense, or overwhelming, as if the speed of change should create a kind of internal fireworks. But the truth is almost the opposite. The fastest transformations are quiet. They arrive with a sense of calm that feels almost surprising. When you shift into a new identity, the nervous system doesn't erupt. It settles. The body doesn't tense. It softens. The mind doesn't race. It clears. Real change feels less like acceleration and more like landing. This stillness is not emptiness, it's coherence. It's the feeling of no longer fighting the past or chasing the future. The noise inside you quiets because there's no longer a contradiction between what you desire and who you believe yourself to be. When that contradiction dissolves, the mind stops searching for confirmation. The body stops bracing for disappointment. You enter a state that feels strangely natural, as if you're stepping into a version of yourself you've always known, even if you only just aligned with it. This is why the moments right after a real shift feel so peaceful. The system has reorganized. The effort that once felt necessary no longer serves a purpose. You aren't pushing toward the new identity, you are resting in it. The stillness becomes a sign that the shift is genuine. If you feel the need to constantly reaffirm the new state, the shift hasn't fully settled. But when you feel a quiet confidence, a groundedness, a calm clarity, that is the nervous system anchoring the new timeline. Stillness anchors because it signals the absence of resistance. When you're calm, your internal frequency stabilizes. It doesn't oscillate between hope and fear, between intention and doubt. It holds. The body trusts the new state enough to relax into it, and relaxation is what allows the new identity to integrate. Effort creates strain, and strain disrupts coherence. But stillness creates space, and space allows the identity to root itself. Think of stillness as the pause in the breath right after the exhale. It's not empty, it's full of potential. In that pause, nothing is being forced. Everything is allowed. The new identity rests there, taking shape in the quiet. This pause is powerful because it gives the system time to reorganize without interference. When you feel the shift and let yourself settle into it rather than chase after it, the body learns the new frequency more quickly. This is why the fastest transformations feel slow from the inside. Not because they take time, but because they require surrender rather than exertion. The moment you stop trying to accelerate the process, you match the speed of coherence, which is instantaneous. You align with the present rather than leaning into the future. And when you rest in the present as the version of you who has already shifted, the identity stabilizes effortlessly. Stillness is not the absence of movement, it is the presence of alignment. It is the moment when you realize that speed is a property of the mind, but coherence is a property of the self. When you shift from speed to stillness, you stop chasing transformation and begin living from it. The new identity doesn't need to be held. It simply unfolds inside the quiet space you've allowed. When your internal world shifts into coherence, the external world doesn't stay still. It begins to rearrange itself around the new signal you're broadcasting. This rearrangement doesn't happen with loud announcements or dramatic flashes. It reveals itself through small, precise echoes, moments that feel too aligned to be coincidental. These moments are synchronicities, and they appear not as magical interruptions, but as quiet confirmations that your inner state has shifted into a new timeline. They are reality's way of saying, "I heard you." Synchronicity is not luck, it's not randomness, it's resonance. When your emotional state becomes coherent, your perception changes first. You begin noticing things that were always there but were invisible while you were aligned to an older version of yourself. Then, as your behavior subtly reorganizes, the world around you responds in ways that match your new identity. You might meet the right person at the right moment, stumble across information that feels perfectly timed, or experience events that line up with your intentions in ways too precise to ignore. These moments are reflections of the frequency you now hold. What makes synchronicity powerful is not that it changes reality, but that it reveals your relationship to it. When you are fragmented internally, the world feels chaotic and unresponsive. When you are coherent, the world feels connected, ordered, almost conversational. You begin to sense that reality isn't separate from you. It is interacting with you. The timing of events feels intentional because you have shifted onto a timeline where your inner state and outer experiences mirror each other with increasing clarity. This feedback loop is subtle but unmistakable. The more coherent your internal state becomes, the more fluid the external world feels. You stop encountering as much resistance, situations open, pathways appear. A sense of flow replaces the old sense of effort. You feel as though something is guiding you, not from outside, but from within. A deeper intelligence responding to the emotional frequency you're carrying. Synchronicities serve another purpose as well. They stabilize the identity shift. When the external world begins reflecting your internal alignment, the new identity gains momentum. You begin trusting it more. Doubt loses its power because the evidence around you supports the shift you've made. This creates a reinforcing cycle. Inner coherence shapes outer experience. Outer experience validates inner coherence. Each reflection strengthens the new timeline. The important part is recognizing synchronicity without clinging to it. These moments aren't signs to chase, they're signals to acknowledge. They're reminders that the shift is real, that the emotional state you've embodied is translating into the physical world. When you see them as feedback rather than goals, they deepen your trust in the alignment taking place. You don't need to analyze them. Simply notice. Feel the resonance. Let them strengthen the sense that you're moving in harmony with a larger rhythm. Synchronicity is not the cause of your transformation. It is the echo of it. A reflection of internal coherence becoming external alignment. When you witness these moments with awareness, you begin to understand something profound. You are no longer walking through reality alone. You are in conversation with it. And the more coherent your inner world becomes, the clearer and more frequent those conversations grow. There is a point in every genuine transformation where you stop trying to become the version of yourself you desire and simply begin living as them. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels natural. So natural that you may not even notice the moment it happens. The inner shift has already settled, and now the outer self begins to move in accordance with it. This is the essence of becoming the one who already lives in the reality you've been aligning with. You're not pretending. You're not acting. You're embodying a state that your system has already accepted as true. When the internal frequency stabilizes, your behaviors reorganize without effort. You notice yourself responding differently, choosing differently, perceiving differently. Not because you're trying to maintain a new identity, but because the old identity no longer fits the emotional state you're living in. The past version of you feels distant, almost like a memory belonging to someone else. You don't resist that identity. It simply loses relevance. The tension that once pulled you back into familiar patterns dissolves because your body no longer resonates with them. You can feel this shift in the small things first. You speak with more certainty. You take actions that align with clarity rather than fear. You walk through your day with a subtle sense of inevitability, as if the path ahead is already shaped and you are simply stepping into it. The choices that once required discipline now feel obvious. The hesitation that once slowed you no longer appears. This doesn't happen because you force yourself to behave differently. It happens because you are different emotionally, physiologically, and energetically. Identity is not a mask you wear. It's a state you inhabit. When that state changes, your entire relationship with reality changes with it. The new timeline becomes the default lens through which you interpret the world. You begin to recognize opportunities that match your new frequency because they finally feel relevant. You no longer question whether you deserve them. You no longer analyze every step. The internal debate quiets because the identity that doubted itself is no longer the one calling the shots. This is why embodiment is the true marker of transformation. It is effortless, not because nothing is happening, but because the system has already recalibrated. You don't have to maintain the new identity through willpower. The coherence you established earlier holds it for you. Your nervous system anchors the emotional truth you've stepped into, guiding your behavior in ways that feel intuitive. This is what makes the new timeline sustainable. You aren't pushing yourself into alignment, you're operating from it. Becoming the one who already lives there is not about imagining the future. It's about allowing the future to become the emotional present. Once the body accepts the state, the timeline that matches it becomes the natural path. You walk differently not because you're performing confidence, but because confidence is now the baseline. You trust differently not because you're forcing optimism, but because trust feels like the most accurate response to the frequency you hold. At this stage, life begins to feel less like effort and more like unfolding. You're no longer striving to reach a timeline, you're meeting it. The gap closes because the identity you've embodied is the very identity that belongs to that reality. And when identity, emotion, and action align in this way, the external world adjusts with seamless precision. Becoming the one who already lives there is not the final step. It is the beginning of the timeline fully taking shape around you. There comes a moment in every shift where you must choose the timeline you've stepped into, not with force, not with repetition, but with a single quiet declaration that closes the old path and seals the new one. Declaration is not about convincing yourself. It's not about affirming something over and over. It's a decision made from coherence, a decision that carries the weight of who you have already become. When you declare the timeline, You are not asking reality to respond, you are acknowledging that it already has. This kind of declaration doesn't happen at the beginning of the transformation. It happens once the internal state has stabilized, once the emotional frequency has aligned, once the identity shift has taken root. At that point, the declaration becomes a closing of the old narrative. It's a conscious release of the version of you who lived by the limitations you once accepted. And in that release, there is a sense of finality. Not dramatic, but certain. It feels like quietly shutting a door you no longer need to walk through. When you declare the timeline, you're not speaking to the universe. You're speaking to your own system. You are marking the moment where the new identity becomes non-negotiable. You are choosing coherence over conflict, clarity over doubt, presence over hesitation. This choice doesn't require intensity. It requires honesty. It requires the willingness to say without wavering, "This is who I am now." And because your body already feels the truth of it, the declaration locks the frequency in place. It becomes the anchor that keeps you from slipping back into the old emotional patterns out of habit or familiarity. This closure is powerful precisely because it is simple. When you choose a timeline without doubt, your actions no longer carry the subtle trace of uncertainty. You stop checking whether you are doing it right. You stop looking for signs to validate the shift. You stop questioning whether you've changed enough. The declaration ends the conversation. The decision becomes the reference point from which everything else unfolds. What makes this so effective is that declaration is not effort. It's alignment expressed through choice. The body has already reorganized. The emotional frequency has already stabilized. The identity has already shifted. The declaration is the final click that signals to your subconscious that there is no open loop left to resolve. The past timeline no longer needs your attention. The new one no longer needs your pursuit. You are simply choosing the state that already feels like home. When doubt arises, and it occasionally will, it doesn't threaten the timeline. You don't fight the doubt. You don't argue with it. You simply return to the moment of declaration, the moment when you decided who you are now. That decision holds more weight than any temporary thought could. It becomes the compass that keeps you oriented, the stabilizing point around which the rest of your experience organizes itself. Declaring the timeline without doubt is not the end of the journey. It is the moment the journey becomes singular. There is no alternate path, no competing identity, no lingering resonance with the former version of you. There is only the timeline you chose, the frequency you embodied, and the identity that now carries you forward. Through declaration, you seal the shift, not through repetition, but through certainty. Living the new timeline is not about maintaining momentum or pushing yourself to act like a different person. It's about allowing coherence to express itself naturally through your behavior. When the emotional state has shifted and the identity has settled, your actions begin to reflect that shift without effort. What once required discipline becomes instinctive. What once felt like a choice becomes a natural extension of who you are now. You aren't trying to behave like the future version of yourself. You are behaving from the emotional truth that this version already lives inside you. Coherence shows itself in subtle ways first. You notice that situations which used to trigger old patterns no longer pull you in the same direction. You pause before reacting. You choose differently, not because you're forcing a new habit, but because the old response no longer matches the frequency you're living in. Emotional fidelity, remaining loyal to the state you've embodied, guides your choices more than any set of rules or routines. You simply gravitate toward what aligns with the identity you've already accepted. This is where consistency emerges, not as discipline, but as resonance. When you live from the emotional truth of your new timeline, you don't have to remind yourself who you are becoming. The state itself reminds you. The body leads the mind. The emotional signature guides your actions. This is why the new timeline feels more stable than the old one ever did. It doesn't require constant reinforcement because it's not rooted in effort. It's rooted in identity. You begin to move through the world with a quiet steadiness. Decisions simplify. You feel a deeper sense of clarity about what fits and what doesn't, because anything that contradicts the new identity feels out of tune. The friction that once slowed you starts to fall away. You stop negotiating with your old patterns because the emotional coherence you're carrying doesn't allow you to slip comfortably back into them. They don't feel like home anymore. This shift in action isn't dramatic. It unfolds through small, natural adjustments. You speak from a place of certainty without thinking about it. You treat yourself with more respect because the emotional state you inhabit demands it. You take opportunities that match your new frequency because they feel congruent, not intimidating. You decline situations that once trapped you because they no longer resonate. Each of these choices reinforces the timeline not through effort but through alignment. Living the new timeline means you allow the inner shift to shape your outer life without micromanaging the process. You trust the coherence you've created. You let it inform your behavior the way gravity informs movement, quietly, steadily, without needing to be monitored. As you carry this emotional fidelity through your days, you notice that life begins to reflect it back to you. External experiences match your internal frequency with increasing consistency. People respond to the version of you that leads with clarity rather than contradiction. This is how consistency is built, not through repetition, but through remaining committed to the emotional state that defines your new timeline. When you hold that state gently, your actions rise from it naturally, and as they do, the timeline you once imagined becomes the reality you now live, moment by moment, choice by choice, frequency by frequency. Time continues its steady march forward, hour after hour, day after day, never hesitating, never pausing. Yet once you've anchored yourself in the fulfilled state, something remarkable occurs. You stop moving according to the pace of the clock. Your transformation no longer depends on minutes or months. It unfolds from a different place entirely, a place beyond time, where identity shifts happen in a single breath and timelines bend around the state you embody. This is the paradox at the heart of your evolution. Time moves forward, but you move beyond time. The moment you step into the emotional frequency of the reality you desire, you are no longer waiting for a future version of yourself to appear. You are living from that version now. You inhabit a state that is not tied to the linear progression of events. The body believes, and when the body believes, reality reorganizes. Not slowly, not eventually, immediately, in the deeper layers of your being where change originates. This is why transformation feels like a sudden clarity rather than a slow climb. It emerges from coherence, not from time. You begin to sense how artificial the old idea of becoming really was. Becoming suggests distance, effort, a path measured in steps. But when you shift your emotional state, you bypass the long road entirely. You move straight into alignment with a timeline that reflects your new identity. It feels as if time itself bends to meet you, as if the version of you who already lives the life you want is pulling you forward, rather than waiting far ahead. The future no longer feels separate. It feels present. This is the essence of living beyond time, not escaping it, but no longer being limited by it. You understand that the clock governs actions, schedules, and routines, but it does not govern identity. Identity shifts the moment coherence arrives. And when identity shifts, you begin interacting with reality as a different version of yourself. The external world eventually mirrors this, but the internal shift comes first. It always has. What's profound is how calm this realization feels. There's no rush, no urgency. You're not racing against time, because you're no longer trying to reach something outside of yourself. You carry the future state within you. And because you carry it, the timeline it belongs to naturally unfolds around you. You notice small signs of alignment, subtle shifts in behavior, openings that seem perfectly timed. This is not coincidence. It is the natural consequence of living from the identity that shapes the timeline instead of waiting for the timeline to shape the identity. As you reach this final understanding, you see that your evolution was never about doing more, trying harder, or waiting longer. It was about stepping into a state that felt true enough for your body to accept. Once that happened, time became secondary. You moved from the swing of effort into the stillness of coherence, from the chase into presence, from becoming into being. Time moves forward, yes, but you, the deeper you, the coherent you, move from a place that is not bound by hours or days. You move from identity, and identity shapes reality faster than time ever could. This is the paradox that completes the transformation. When you shift your state, you don't wait for the future. You meet it. And in that meeting, the timeline rearranges itself around who you have already become. If this video resonated with you, tell us in the comments. Your own journey can be inspiring to others, so let everyone know.